This is her 300th time celebrating her father's 52nd birthday. Every time she prepares the same cake, and after her father blows out the candles, she always says the same blessing and gives the same gift. Then, the family sits in front of the TV as if rehearsing a script, watching the movie for the 300th time. Her father is so tired that he can hardly keep his eyes open. Her brother can recite the plot backwards and forwards. Only Lucy is immersed in it, as if it were her first viewing, still startled by the scenes in the movie. Because it truly is her first time watching, whereas in reality, last year's sunny weekend was her father's real 52nd birthday. According to tradition, Lucy accompanied her father driving to the suburbs to pick pineapples, when suddenly they encountered a cow. In the chaos of avoiding, their vehicle hit a tree, breaking several ribs for her father, and Lucy suffered a severe head injury. When she woke up, her memory was back to the day before the incident, and her life was forever stuck in a cycle of the same day. Her father and brother couldn't bear to tell Lucy the cruel truth, so every day after she falls asleep, they race against time, discarding leftover cake, reassembling birthday gifts, preparing last year's Sunday newspaper and the necessary pineapples, even measuring shower gel with a dropper precisely, and finally repainting the mural on the wall. Her father and brother protect Lucy's world day after day, and Lucy has never noticed anything unusual. She thought life would go on like this forever, but Henry's appearance changed everything. Henry is a typical polyamorous person who has had intimate relationships with individuals from different countries, with different skin colors and sexual orientations. However, when the other party tries to deepen the relationship, he often terminates it with various excuses. This time, Henry pretended to be a secret agent going on a covert mission, then turned around and casually jumped onto a jet ski operated by a companion. Since it was lunchtime, he managed to escape and went to a restaurant. Bored, Henry was suddenly attracted by a dazzling reflection and then saw a cute girl carefully stacking waffles into a small tower, pouring hot cocoa inside, creating a steaming volcano. The girl smiled with satisfaction, and Henry couldn't help but smile back. Unexpectedly, an elderly man nearby misunderstood, thinking Henry had an attraction to older people. Fortunately, Henry explained in time, avoiding potential serious consequences. After dinner, Henry returned to his work at the aquarium. Although he is a veterinarian, he occasionally practices medicine on humans. For example, his friend Ula is his ideal test subject, and Ula gladly accepts. After all, he is counting on connecting Henry with others to earn the money needed to raise 5 children. Besides dealing with Ula's unreserved scheming, Henry also has to stay alert to colleagues who covet his interests like hungry wolves. However, to this day, he still has no idea about the gender of these colleagues. But regardless of whether they are male or female, Henry remains completely uninterested. Colleague gazed at Henry with flirtatious eyes, fully aware that Henry was a playboy yavenry. Did Henry suffer emotional wounds in high school? Could it be that his girlfriend secretly held a BDSM party for Henry, causing him to develop shadows in love? The colleague initially thought his guess was sufficiently explosive, but the truth was even more shocking. Henry indeed had deep emotional scars, but it happened in college. His girlfriend quietly fell in love with a same-sex mentor who was over 50 years older than her. The colleague did not show sympathy, but instead became excited because of shared interests and immediately wanted to compete with Henry. Just as things took a turn for the worse, a walrus suddenly encountered a problem, and they hurriedly tried to rescue it. After some effort, the walrus vomited out the filth in its stomach, spraying it all over the colleague's face. Henry couldn't help but secretly laugh because he knew the walrus would definitely vomit, so he had deliberately made the colleague stand opposite him to repay the earlier teasing. The next day, Henry returned to the restaurant and found that the girl from yesterday not only still sat in her original spot, but also continued to play with the waffle. This time, she no longer made a volcano but built a castle with waffles, although one piece kept falling apart. Henry saw an opportunity and picked up a toothpick to help. Seeing that the castle's gate had a bearing, Lucy immediately showed admiration and then invited Henry to dine together. Thus, the two began their first conversation. Henry first introduced himself and then expressed that he had always dreamed of sailing his own ship to Alaska to study walruses, but unfortunately, during a navigation mishap, the mast suddenly broke and his plans had to be interrupted. Currently, he was working on an island in Hawaii, repairing his ship while working part-time. Lucy responded with a smile. No wonder Henry has a certain smell, but Lucy doesn't find it unpleasant because her father and brother are fishermen. They come back every day and hug Lucy, which is her happiest moment. And the fishy smell on them is, in Lucy's view, the most fragrant scent in the world. As they became more familiar, their topics of conversation deepened, such as dolphins being known for their activity and walruses for their intelligence. Walruses are a bit different. They have the second largest penis in the world. Lucy couldn't help but wonder who had the largest, and Henry jokingly explained, maybe the waiter next to us, slicing ham with a knife. Because Lucy had to rush home to celebrate her father's 302nd birthday, they had to part ways. But when they reached the car, neither of them got in. Instead, they excitedly danced upon meeting their dream lover. However, awkwardly, the large bus between them suddenly drove away without warning, causing both to see each other's crazy sides. But this made Henry even more infatuated, to the point that while playing golf with friends, he even had a hallucination of kissing Lucy Dye in the evening. Henry went to the bar as usual, where a thirsty blonde woman invited him to spend a lovely night together. If it had been before, Henry would have gladly agreed, but now he was unresponsive because he was entirely thinking of Lucy, so Henry declined. However, the next day, Lucy no longer recognized Henry, and even when he approached her to chat, Lucy thought he was a stalker. Just as Henry was full of confusion, the bar owner secretly revealed the truth to him. After hearing this, Henry found it incredible, but his friend Ula said, Lucy is a perfect match for Henry because one doesn't want responsibility and the other has no memory after waking up. However, Henry suddenly changed his personality, unable to bear having ulterior motives toward a sick girl, and besides, his boat was repaired, so pursuing his dreams was the priority. But at that moment, Willa accidentally stepped on the boat planks, realizing that perhaps this was fate, so Henry let go of his psychological burden and continued to chat up Lucy at the restaurant. Not only that, Henry and the waiter bet $20 that he would definitely win Lucy's favor. The first time, Henry was lucky to see Lucy building a castle with waffles, so he confidently picked up a toothpick and went over. Henry still, as before, inserted the toothpick into the waffle, but Lucy did not thank him. Instead, she scolded him for lacking manners, touching a stranger's food without permission. The first attempt failed. The next day, unyielding Henry drew a simple picture with paper. Although the strokes looked lively, Lucy immediately saw through Henry's trick, pretending not to understand English and refusing to talk to him. Despite repeated setbacks, Henry persisted. This time, he changed his strategy, no longer taking the initiative, but pretending to be someone who couldn't understand the menu at all. This trick actually worked. Seeing Henry crying helplessly like a child, Lucy, a teacher, immediately stepped forward, gently comforting him and teaching him to read on the spot. But he clearly forgot that high-level hunters often appear in the form of prey. It turned out that from the moment Henry deliberately made a loud noise, Lucy was well aware of his tricks. So when they parted, Lucy thought Henry would take the initiative to ask for contact information, but unexpectedly, Henry hesitated and even wanted to leave directly. Helpless, Lucy had to clarify the truth. Henry never thought that, as a seasoned romantic, he would be defeated by a seemingly innocent girl. However, he was not angry at being exposed. Instead, he felt sorry for his deception. But when he wanted to apologize, Lucy had already driven away. To prevent the misunderstanding from lingering overnight, Henry also drove to catch up, but as soon as he arrived at Lucy's house, he was stopped and harshly scolded by Lucy's father and brother, perhaps feeling that words are not enough to deter. His muscular younger brother wanted to suppress Henry with strength. In the end, although he was muscular, he was easily knocked down before even fighting. Despite having the physical advantage, Henry had no intention of a one-night stand with Lucy. Otherwise, he would have asked Lucy for her contact information just now. Therefore, after receiving the warning, Henry decided not to bother Lucy anymore. However, back at the marine park where he worked, Henry felt a twinge of regret. Colleagues advised Henry to keep his promises, but soon they changed their tune and said, if it were him, he would blindfold himself to find Lucy, and that wouldn't be considered betrayal. Although he thought this approach was a bit sleazy, Henry gained inspiration from it. Previously, he had only promised not to meet Lucy at the restaurant, so he began deliberately creating chance encounters on Lucy's way to the restaurant. On the first day, he pretended that his car had a dead battery. When Lucy was lending him power, he even pretended to be electrocuted, causing Lucy to scream in shock. Henry thought his prank was successful, but Lucy was even more clever. Lucy laughed and said, "It's just pretending to be scared of Henry. It's not that easy to fall for." Thus, they successfully exchanged names. On the second day, due to heavy rain, Henry played the role of a road maintenance worker. When Lucy drove by, he approached and started a conversation legitimately. Moreover, to leave a deep impression on Lucy, he also flattered her by saying, at this time, Lucy should have just finished breakfast and come back. I don't know what Lucy loves to eat most, but Henry says he loves waffles and even likes to build houses with pancakes. Lucy was stunned on the spot, thinking she had met a soulmate with similar tastes. In this way, Henry planned to succeed again. On the third day, Henry used an adorable pet to attract Lucy's attention. However, when Henry placed a small penguin in the middle of the road, Lucy, who was driving and bending down to pick something up, didn't notice the road conditions ahead and almost ran over the penguin with her car. On the fourth day, Henry decided to step up his game. Henry had Ulla pretend to be a villain, kicking, hitting, and insulting him. He intended to stage a hero saving the beauty scene, but unexpectedly, Lucy turned out to be a female warrior. Without hesitation, she grabbed a baseball bat and chased after Ulla to fight. Seeing his friend battered and bruised because of him, Henry felt very guilty. On the fifth day, Henry tied himself up and threw himself into the back of a roadside truck, hoping Lucy would rescue and sympathize with him. But this time, he not only failed to wait for Lucy, but also ended up with Lucy's father and brother arriving. They were surprised to find out that although Lucy did not remember Henry, every time she saw Henry again, she would happily sing the same love song. Therefore, the father thought that Lucy might really have fallen for Henry, which also changed his attitude towards Henry. In the days that followed, Henry, no longer hindered, resumed his routine of Lucy at the restaurant. Everything seemed normal at first, but an accident happened that day. Because Lucy's license had expired, her vehicle was penalized by the police. Sensing something was wrong, Henry quickly followed. People who knew Lucy before had always been very guarded, fearing she would be upset if she discovered the truth. But even the best defenses eventually had a flaw, and this time they could no longer conspire with the traffic police. Upon learning that the current time was seriously inconsistent with her perception, Lucy returned home in disbelief to question her father. Helpless, her father could only tell the truth and then showed her medical records from the hospital. Although the facts were now clear, Lucy still refused to accept them. She decided to go to the hospital and ask the doctor directly. On the way, learning that Henry was dating her, Lucy suddenly panicked. To her, Henry was still a stranger. She was afraid of having intimate contact with a stranger and blurted out her fears. In front of Lucy's family, this was undoubtedly a life-threatening question. Fortunately, the two of them did not cross any boundaries, and Henry was lucky enough to avoid a beating. Soon, they arrived at the hospital. Although the doctor had explained Lucy's condition many times, he patiently repeated it in detail once again. Due to damage to the brain area, Lucy has lost the ability to convert short-term memory into long-term memory during sleep, which is why she can remember what happened before the car accident, but cannot recall each scene after the accident. Seeing the doctor so professional, Lucy's younger brother couldn't help but want to ask a private question on behalf of his friend. In order to achieve a better ranking in the fitness competition, he occasionally took steroids, but recently he had been experiencing nocturnal emissions and wondered if there was any connection. The doctor advised, to maintain health, do not take banned drugs in the future. As for his subsequent problem, perhaps he should throw away his sleeveless shirt with holes and invite a girl he likes to dinner. After speaking, the doctor eagerly turned back to Lucy. Lucy's condition is currently very stable, so there's no need to worry too much. But this obviously couldn't comfort Lucy. Fortunately, the doctor, well-versed in human nature and psychology, understood the principle that sharing misery can have the pain. So, he introduced Lucy to a patient with an even worse condition, with only 10 seconds of memory. They had just finished introductions, but because the other person's memory lasted only 10 seconds, the entire meeting was mostly spent in small talk. She thought Lucy would pretend to be comforted by others suffering to soothe her wounded heart. But she not only didn't think so, she even felt sympathy for the other person. A man who should have enjoyed a glorious youth and explored a bigger world now can only be trapped in the hospital, endlessly spinning in 10 seconds of time. Lucy feels this is too cruel. Fortunately, the person involved is completely unaware, which can be considered the world's last bit of kindness toward him. After returning home from the hospital, it was already completely dark. During their day together, Lucy found Henry to be genuinely warm and sincere, so when they parted, Lucy Henry. Although feeling very happy inside, after all, she had gained the recognition of someone she liked, Henry felt that if things continued like this, it wouldn't be a long-term solution, so when he left, he secretly took Lucy's medical records. The next day, he disguised himself as a courier, acting as a messenger of love, and delivered a bouquet of lilies and a videotape to Lucy. Upon learning that someone secretly admired her, Lucy eagerly returned to her room to watch the tape, only to find that although there were no sweet words, the content was filled with love. It turned out that Henry had edited and compiled all the major national events that occurred within nearly a year into the video, aiming to fill in Lucy's missing year's memories. Not only that, he also presented photos from Lucy's car accident, briefly explaining the resulting illness. Furthermore, to help Lucy re-recognize herself, he enlisted his friend Ulla, recreating the entire process of their first meeting. Because Ula's appearance and performance were very humorous, the originally sad Lucy burst into laughter again, which was exactly Henry's intention. Henry knew the truth was cruel. Once Lucy knew, she would surely be upset, so he wanted to tell her, even if life encounters misfortune, there are still many people around who truly love her. They will not only stay, but also be grateful that she always remains by their side. After watching the video and calming her emotions, Lucy asked Henry to take her to the scene of the accident. Since a year had passed, the tree trunk that was hit had fully healed. Henry saw this and immediately encouraged Lucy. Pain will eventually fade because Henry and Lucy's family will always be by her side. Lucy looked at the person in front of her, seemingly unreliable, but actually steady and dependable, and couldn't help but feel wistful. It would be so good if I had met Henry before the accident. But Henry said, he's actually very boring. If they really spent every day together, they definitely get tired of each other. If every day is a first meeting, Lucy will stay fresh to him. And this idea wasn't just Henry's. With the videotape, Lucy seemed able to live and socialize like a normal person. That day, Lucy and Henry gathered with friends at the seaside. When one of the girls learned about their love story, she said enviously, "This kind of pattern is really good, one willing to repeatedly coax, and the other keeps falling in love again." Subsequently, the woman turned around, gently patted her husband, and said, "This rude fellow no longer even wants to open the car door for her." Indeed, happiness cannot be compared, otherwise everything becomes bleak. As daylight faded and night fell, Lucy began recording the end of a day with Henry using a camcorder. Although she could always feel loved, she couldn't help but ask, "Do you really love me?" The sudden question left Henry at a loss. Before knowing Lucy, Henry had always played around. Deep emotional wounds in the past made him afraid to love again and be loved. For him, love was not a fleeting word, but a promise and responsibility, a vow to be protected for a lifetime, thus it must be taken seriously. After much thought, Henry replied with great sincerity, "I love you very much. This love is stronger than any for anyone else." At that moment, Lucy's heart was completely melted, and the two couldn't help but embrace and kiss. Since then, Lucy fell in love with Henry anew every day. Their meeting was always their first encounter. Their love was always their first love, and each kiss was their first kiss. During their 23rd first kiss, Henry finally lost control and began to test Lucy. Initially, Lucy remained reserved. To be fair, she decided to seek Jocko's opinion. As long as Jocko approved, she was willing to develop a closer relationship with Henry. Jocko was the walrus Henry had always cared for, not only intelligent, but also understanding. When Lucy asked, "Should we take the next step tonight with Henry?" Jocko nodded happily in agreement. Then, Lucy led Henry into the room. After a passionate embrace, under the bright moonlight and beside a warm campfire, Henry played and sang love songs for her, and they finally achieved perfect union of body and soul. Late at night, they slept again in each other's arms, enjoying the initial touch of love. When Henry solemnly proposed, Lucy happily agreed and promised never to forget each other. However, when the golden morning sun bathed the sea, Lucy, awakening from her sleep, forgot everything. When she realized a strange man was sleeping beside her, she let out a sharp scream. Despite Henry's frantic explanations, Lucy, wielding a stick, struck him on the head, causing him to faint on the spot. When Henry woke up again, the doctor had completed a full examination. Fortunately, his injuries were not serious. Meanwhile, Lucy watched the videotape again to understand the whole incident. Lucy intended to go downstairs and apologize to Henry, but accidentally overheard Henry talking about travel plans. It turned out that Henry decided to postpone his exploration of the walrus and stay to accompany Lucy, because he could genuinely feel that Lucy was gradually recovering her memory. However, the doctor frankly admitted that Lucy's condition was beyond recovery, and there was no precedent in medical history for a similar case being cured. The doctor suggested that rather than clinging to unrealistic hopes and being stranded on this lonely island, it would be better to continue pursuing one's dreams. However, Henry remained stubborn, and upon hearing this, Lucy couldn't help but feel saddened. Although she loved Henry deeply and was reluctant to part with him, she also couldn't bear to be an obstacle to her beloved. Therefore, after careful consideration, Lucy took the initiative to break up with Henry. Not only that, she also decided to delete all content related to Henry from her diary, as if Henry had never appeared in her life. At first, Henry refused to agree, believing that as long as they loved each other, they could overcome all difficulties and obstacles. But seeing Lucy's firm decision, he no longer insisted. That night, Lucy handed Henry a diary to browse. Since receiving the videotape, Lucy had been recording everything by hand. Her words contained both moments of their love and complaints, such as Henry not lasting long enough. Henry, feeling a bit embarrassed, tactfully said, "Duration isn't important. Good experience is the key." After burning all their memories in a reluctant farewell, a sudden heavy rain started outside. The two of them sadly kissed goodbye in the rain. After the breakup, Henry was lost in thought every day, his mind constantly haunted by Lucy's image. To avoid further emotional pain from the scene, he decided to pursue his sailing dream. On the day of departure, Lucy's father and brother came with gifts to see him off, telling him that Lucy had not only gone to a sanatorium, but also started a painting class there and even began singing. Hearing this, Henry sincerely felt relieved for Lucy. But as the boat slowly left the harbor, his carefully maintained composure suddenly crumbled. Tears welled up as he sang Lucy's favorite song to honor their lost love. At that moment, Henry suddenly remembered that Lucy only sang on the days she met him. Since they hadn't seen each other now, did that mean Lucy still remembered him? Henry immediately changed direction and ran all the way to the sanatorium. But to his disappointment, when he asked, Lucy still claimed not to recognize him. However, just as he was about to leave in disappointment, Lucy took him into her studio, where he was surprised to see all Henry's portraits. It turned out that although Lucy didn't remember Henry, she dreamed of his face every night, so she drew it. Someone once said that true lovers, even if their memories are erased, will still remember each other because love comes from the heart. As long as the heart is there, love will not be lost. Years later, one day, when Lucy woke from a beautiful dream, her first sight was the videotape on the bedside table, recording their happy wedding moments, and when Lucy regained her lost memory, after opening the curtains, she suddenly realized that outside was the shimmering sea and majestic snow-capped mountains. It turned out that after their marriage, the two of them embarked on a voyage, fulfilling Henry's initial dream. Moreover, when Lucy stepped onto the deck, a girl suddenly threw herself into her arms, and she was the embodiment of the love between her and Henry. Although Lucy only had one day's memory, she undoubtedly possessed a lifelong love. As for her father, he had always been by their side, and her brother had also formed a romantic bond with Henry's colleague.